I'd like to welcome everybody to this meeting 213 of the Planning Committee. This meeting is being broadcast on the internet and the recording of this meeting will be published on the Council's website. Given the COVID-19 circumstances where we can't yet have members of the community here with us in the gallery, it is really terrific that we can still share our meetings with you via the live stream. Council would like to acknowledge the Wadawurrung, the traditional owners of this land, and we pay our respects to all elders past, present, and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are part of the Greater Geelong community today. I'd like to introduce the panel to you. We do have Councillor Jim Mason, we have Councillor Trent Sullivan, the Mayor Stephanie Asher, myself, Kylie Grisbeck, Councillor Bruce Harwood and Councillor Belinda Maloney together here today. I'd like to introduce the officers that we have in the room as well. We have Joanne Van Slageren, who's the Manager of City Development. We have John Rush, who's the Coordinator at Statutory Planning, and we have Verity Bright, who's the Senior Statutory Planner. For this, the procedure for this hearing of this evening will be that the officers will present a brief summary of the written report to the committee. The panel may ask questions of the officers, and then I will detail some of the submissions made to the committee, and then we will further discuss the application in hopes to make a decision. The decision of this committee is a final decision of Council under the delegated authority, so acting under the delegated authority. If anyone is aggrieved at this decision of the committee, they may appeal to the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal, as we know it as VCAT, in Melbourne. Our staff can assist you with that process during office hours. We do have some apologies. We've got Councillor Nelson, Councillor Aiken, Councillor Mansfield, Councillor Contell and Councillor Murray here who have issued apologies for tonight. I'd like to do the confirmation of the minutes of the last meeting from the 10th of December. Can I have a mover and seconder, please? Councillor Sullivan to move, Councillor Mason to second. All those in favour? Thank you. Any declarations of conflicts of interest today from the panel? No? Thank you. So the matter we have before us today is PP 942-2020, which is 5 to 17 Oakdean Road in Drysdale. I'd like to invite the officers to prepare their report, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The site is located at 5 to 17 Oakden Road in Drysdale on the south side of the road and is in a general residential zone Schedule 1, and the site is not affected by any overlays. The allotment is irregular in shape and has an overall area of approximately 1.96 hectares. The application is for a 34-lot vacant subdivision with an internal horseshoe road. The existing dwelling will be retained to the rear of the site on a proposed lot of approximately 1,300 square metres. The surrounding area is also General Residential Zone Schedule 1, with the exception of the cemetery to the north, which is the Public Use Zone Schedule 5. And the surrounding lots are standard residential lots with mainly single dwellings. There are some larger lots to the south of the site in Bennett Street that have been developed with a mix of 6 and 7 dwellings. The site currently contains an existing dwelling to the rear and an outbuilding which has had a previous permit for a Pilates studio. However, it's unclear if this permit has ever been acted upon. All vegetation on the site has been planted and is exotic, and there's no native vegetation present on the site. The application was advertised via notices sent to the adjoining owners and occupiers, and there was also a sign placed on site. And from that, a total of 56 objections were received at the time the report was written, and a further 2 submissions were received after that. Also, 1 petition opposing the application was received, which had 35 signatures. The application was referred internally to Engineering, Environment, Rec and Open Space, Parks and our Waste Department, who all supported the application subject to conditions outlined in the report. Barwon Water, Powercore and Downer Tenex and the CFA were also asked to give comments on the application and provided conditions with no objections. Vic Roads was not required to be consulted, as Oakden Road is a council road and not managed by Vic Roads. And no consultation meeting occurred given the COVID-19 situation. The objections received raised a variety of issues, but the major reoccurring themes were the neighbourhood character, the density of the development being too high, increase to the traffic and safety concerns from that, the loss of trees and habitat, impacts to the drainage and concerns with existing drainage, and impacts to the existing amenity. The proposal has been assessed against the Greater Geelong Planning Scheme, including the relevant sections of the zone, the Victorian Planning Policy Framework, Clause 56 for residential subdivisions, and Clause 6502 for applications to subdivide the land. The application has been considered to appropriately comply. The application has also been assessed against Council's updated settlement strategy, which is currently with the Planning Minister for approval. The site is located within the settlement boundary for the Drysdale-Clifton Springs area and is an existing urban area that can accommodate and expects medium density development. The site is well located from the existing commercial area of Drysdale, which creates a more compact neighbourhood to support and promote sustainable transport, consistent with the planning policy framework for built form. A variety of lot sizes allow for a mix and diverse choice of housing stock, which will cater to the changing household types required by the existing community that is encouraged by the state housing policy. Both the state and local planning policy encourages sustainable growth and development and encourages development to occur within the existing settlement boundaries. This helps limit urban sprawl and further allows for urban renewal and compact urban areas. The drainage concerns have been assessed by Council's Engineering Department, who supported the development subject to conditions. For example, proposed condition 18 and 19 require the road and drainage plans to be submitted and approved, constructed accordingly. Oakton Road will be required to be upgraded from the subject site west towards Clifton Springs Road. Infill development allows for infrastructure to be upgraded, which will benefit the existing residents. Since the report has been finalised, the application has been appealed to VCAT as a failure to determine within the 60 statutory days. Therefore, it is recommended that Council advocates for a permit to be issued at the tribunal, subject to the conditions outlined within the planning report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions of the officers, please? Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was wondering, do we have any consultation with the Geelong Cemeteries Trust in regards to this application at all?
But they weren't required to be referred to. I'd have to double check if we sent them a notice. But there was some concerns raised by the residents about the cemetery, but we had no objections from the Cemetery Trust itself.
So, yeah, the reason I bring that up is that having 35 subdivisions on here, cemeteries, if there is an event, a funeral as such, being right across the road and adjacent to the car park as well, that just leads into traffic flow and number of vehicles in the area. Further on to that, in regards to traffic, I believe we have it here in our traffic report that we expect there will be 120 extra traffic movements per day if this development was to go ahead, or subdivision rather.
In the traffic report submitted with the application, they estimated that the average lot would generate 8 vehicle movements per day, and I think there is 8 lots that are accessed straight from Oakton Road, and then all the other movements would come from the shared access.
I'm just in regards to that. So, with our traffic report, do we take into account that Oakton Road itself is not a terribly busy road? It's got speed humps and whatnot. But at each end of Oakton Road, we've got Clifton Springs Road and what is now Collins Street, which are both significantly busy roads these days with the development that's going on. One being a major access road down to Clifton Springs, and the other one being the main vein road through town, which is also now a very heavy road in regards to all the education and school precincts, which is extraordinarily busy at peak times. Do we believe that these intersections can cope with the extra traffic flow that they're currently bearing?
I suppose the traffic report just touches on the traffic movements internally and directly onto Oakton Road, and because there's no direct access to the Vic roads, we aren't required to consult with them. So given that there's only might be 8 vehicle movements per day per lot, and Oakton Road can accommodate for that, I imagine that the other roads, Clifton Springs Road, would be able to accommodate for those movements. And given the site's proximity to the commercial area of Drysdale, it does promote sustainable transport, and it is located within proximity to 2 different bus routes as well.
To raise that with the other members of the committee, that these roads, the 2 roads, that there's no other way to get to Oakton Road as opposed to going off these 2 major roads, which are now hellish at times of peak traffic at the moment. So there's an extra burden that this area will have to bear. Let's go ahead.
Councillor Sullivan. Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Councillor Grisbeck. I note that you mentioned that it wasn't possible to have consultation because of COVID, community consultation, I suppose, but I'd like to focus on the developer per se. How much opportunity was there to consider different designs? And when I'm thinking about designs, I might mention diversity. Nearly all these blocks are 390 or 450 square metres. So they're all very small except for the 3 that retain some existing buildings, etc. So was there any negotiation with the developer in terms of the diversity and size of the blocks?
The applicant received all the objections after the public notice finished, so they had opportunity to respond and make changes to the plans if they chose to, but they didn't. They wanted us to make a decision on the plans in front of us, and given we had comments from all the internal and external departments who raised no issues with the layout or the road network, traffic movements, and also that there was no variations to the assessment for the residential subdivision, the Clause 56 assessment. There was no variation, so they were complying. So we can encourage change, but we can't force them to make any change. So they didn't. They chose to leave the development as is, but the average lot size is 445 square metres, and in the area there are some smaller lot sizes, 225, whilst there are some larger lot sizes. I would say that the development does provide for a diversity of lot sizes, given that the smallest one is 325 and then the largest lot is 13,000 square metres to retain that existing dwelling. There is a mix of choice in there, and that would then go on to allow for a mix of housing diversity and a variety of housing choices, because we know that households are changing, we have an ageing demographic, people don't need the same type of housing that they've always needed in the past.
Thank you. I'd just like to continue that the immediately surrounding houses, most of those are on larger lots, are on single level dwellings. It appears to me, could you please correct me if I'm wrong, but the existing blocks will be to some extent encouraging 2-level dwellings so that you can meet the 25% undeveloped area or garden area. Is that so?
Because they're not required to provide development plans, it's a bit unknown how these lots could be developed, so it would be up to the individual owners how they wish to develop their site. So it could be single storey or it could be double storey, but double storey is quite a normal form of development in any residential area. And yeah, we can't control the development outcome, but yeah, double storey is quite acceptable in residential areas.
And my last question for the moment, please, I just want to come back to the size of the blocks. They all appear to be similar size. Where is the attempt to provide diversity?
There is diversity in the fact that the lots are provided with different widths. There's different street frontages. You can see from the plan the different colours represent the different sizes. So that I believe that there is a diversity in the housing choice, the lot sizes, having some that are smaller for 325 and then you've got some that are bigger at 460. That's, you know, almost large in comparison to normal housing lots these days. I suppose because of the existing subdivision layout is an older subdivision layout, so it has court bowls, and court bowls, because they had to accommodate for the court bowl, they would have smaller street frontages and were larger at the back to accommodate a house to go on there. So the existing subdivision plan, I suppose, is different to what we see nowadays because we don't tend to have court bowls as much. So just because of what's around doesn't mean we should copy exactly what's there. Like I said, that people are looking for different housing choices nowadays. People are looking for diversity in lot sizes and don't want a big lot anymore. So I'm comfortable with the application that there is a diversity in the lot sizes.
Councillor Mason, any other questions at this point? I do have a question around the lot sizes. Are the lot sizes, how are they comparing to the houses that surround that development? So how do the lot sizes compare? Are they larger, smaller? What do we see there?
The average lot size in this development is 445 square metres, and just taking into account the existing block around this site, the average lot size would be about 600 square metres. So the average lot size is smaller than what we have seen within the area, but also saying that there are lots to the south of the site which have been developed with multi-dwellings which have smaller lots of 225 that aren't seen within this development. So compared to the area, I would say it's on par.
Yeah. Are they unit developments that you're referring to, the smaller lots behind that lot? Are they sort of a unit development?
Yeah, they're 6 and 7 dwellings on the one lot that have been further subdivided.
Would you say that the three larger lots from our map that we have in front of you in the pink skewer the average of the size of the lot on the plan? Because I think if you take into account sort of the pink lots and maybe even the 500 lot and look at the size, the average would be a little smaller than that. Would that be true to say?
I would say that's probably an accurate statement.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions at this stage before we go there? No? Okay. The following list is the list of names of people that have made written submissions, and I'll read out their names. We won't read out the full list. We do have that paperwork here, councillors, and I hope you have read that. Gillian Knox, we've got Carl and Bernice Savidis. We've got a submission from the Drysdale Clifton Springs Kerr-Lewis Association. We've got written submissions from Julie Penfold and Kevin McCotry. Hopefully I said that right. Gail Croft, Mercedes and Bruce Drummond, George and Brenda Sang, Janine and Ralph Sewell. We've got Jackie Noble, Alan Russell, Kathy and Peter Coughlin, and Bob Penfold. I'll just summarise some of the points from their written submissions. That it's a high-density application that does not fit into the local environment. The removal of the trees will cause a loss of habitat for fauna and loss of privacy for the adjoining residents. The existing infrastructure will not cope with the increased traffic. A lack of parking, an inadequate stormwater drainage, noise pollution, dust and the destruction of land, and the inadequate access for emergency services. The applicant has provided a written response to those submissions, and that is that the proposal is an excellent infill opportunity in close proximity to services and facilities at a density that is responsive to zoning and neighbourhood character. The surrounding road network can easily accommodate additional traffic. The Oakton Road and the drainage network can both be upgraded to address traffic, road safety and drainage concerns. The existing exotic trees can be replaced with indigenous species, providing a far greater contribution to the biodiversity of the area and habitat and food sources for local fauna, consistent with both local and Victorian policies. Residential development brings construction jobs for the local economy and creates new homes for people to be part of the Drysdale community. That's the written submission back from the applicant. So at this point, I wanted to see if the panel has any further questions after hearing those. I have another question. Just some of the things that have been raised out of those submissions were the lack of parking. Has this application asked for a change in the parking requirements?
There isn't any specific parking requirements given it's just for subdivision. So if we were considering development, that would be different. There's a statutory car parking rate. But as you can see on the plan, there has been some allocated space for indenting car spaces. And in the traffic report, it did show that there was enough room in the internal road to allow for on-street car parking as well.
And in terms of the emergency services, I'm assuming that they have in there, we wrote to them in terms of a referral, they have put conditions on the subdivision, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. We sent it to the CFA and they provided conditions back with no objections.
And in terms of the trees, I guess, I'm a little concerned about the loss of so many trees on such a beautiful big site. There is some potential to put those trees, so that they're taking all of those trees away from the whole site, and including the council trees at the front, and which they will replace. Is that right?
Yeah, so because all the trees on site are planted and or exotic, there's no planning permit trigger for them to be removed, so they could go out there effectively tonight and remove them without the need for a planning permit. So we did encourage them to retain existing vegetation, especially along the boundary where it would provide that protection to the existing neighbours, but because they're unclear of where services would be going, it's hard to protect the existing vegetation when we have no planning mechanism to retain it. But they will be replacing all the street trees, and they will be required to plant new street trees within the development. And there's also a condition recommended that would require them to protect any trees on the neighbouring properties as well.
Can I just ask, is Oakton Road, does it have a footpath currently, and are they required to put the footpath along Oakton Road as well?
I don't believe there's a footpath. I'd have to double check the conditions about providing a footpath.
Any other questions from councillors? No? Do I have anyone that wishes to move a recommendation? Councillor Sullivan.
Madam Chair, I'd like to move an alternative recommendation this evening.
Thank you. Would you mind reading just the first section of that?
The alternative recommendation reads that the responsible authority, having in consideration all matters which the Planning Environment Act 1987 requires it to consider, recommends at the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal, VCAT, to refuse to grant a planning permit for the multi-lot subdivision at 5 to 17 Oakden Road, Drysdale, on the following grounds, and it lists many grounds here, Madam Chair, but generally they revolve around urban structure, neighbourhood character, energy and resource efficiency, street orientation, social interactions, personal safety, property security, neighbourhood street network, safe vehicle access, and stormwater management, to name a few. But however, I believe all of the committee members have this before them in full.
Councillor Sullivan, do you have a seconder for your recommendation? Councillor Asher,
Yes,
thank you.
Yep.
Councillor Sullivan, would you like to speak to your recommendation?
I believe it's already said there in my brief announcement there. It's all before everyone there, and it'll be available to the public in full.
Asher, sorry, Mayor Asher.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Councillor Sullivan, for the alternative. I think while we know that infill is the necessary response to the settlement strategy, which has set the town boundaries, Drysdale is very strong in its sense of neighbourhood character, which is all about peace and tranquility and trees and the history of farmlands. And I think this proposal isn't quite as responsive to the neighbourhood character as the community is seeking, and we've certainly seen that with the commentary from the community. I appreciate the applicants made an effort to provide diversity in the proposal, but I think, as Madam Chair has pointed out, the average block size has actually been lifted by just those 3 or 4 very large blocks, and they are actually quite small. So just that scale and intensity of the subdivision and lack of true diversity in size of the blocks, I think, is of concern. And so on that basis, I support the alternative.
Thank you. Any other councillors like to speak? Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Councillor Grisbeck. I also support the alternative recommendation. I do note, though, that very many of the requirements have been met, as has been answered in accordance with the drainage, the parking, and other elements. But I'm really not convinced about the density, and it seems to be at the lower end of the spectrum. I'm disappointed. I know COVID has had some effect on this, but I'm disappointed that there hasn't been enough community consultation. I'm disappointed that the developer hasn't taken into account neighbourhood character. It may well be that people do want smaller blocks, but in my opinion, there needs to be a mixture of smaller and larger blocks, not all of a similar area. Although they might be a different shape, they are certainly similar in area. So I'm not fully convinced that the neighbourhood character criterion has been met. And for that reason, that main reason, I support the alternative recommendation.
Councillor Mason. Councillor Howard.
Madam Chair, just a couple of quick comments. In relation to the substantial growth of the Bellarine in recent years is well documented, and that has continued. I can see why this has been recommended by the officers, and it makes, I get that view. And I think when we look at what's occurred in recent times with the state government through DELP and the distinctive area landscapes about what that means for the Bellarine and the intent to slow development down on the Bellarine and be, a little more sympathetic to what the Bellarine means to the Geelong region as a whole and what it actually gives to us as an environment down there. And that's been put on in recent times. I think that's something to consider. But I think also the fact that the development itself, what may actually appear on the site is unknown, which I think would make some residents a little nervous about what actually may be in the neighbourhood, the format of the housing. But I'm sure that will play out in time, whichever way this goes. But I think the number of houses or proposed is just too much given what's around it. I'm not against. I don't think even the residents would be against the development per se, but I think the density is probably going to be their greatest concern. So I think there'll be room for compromise. And I think with the unfortunately that hasn't been able to take place with the discussion because of COVID, but I think that would be a discussion that perhaps the applicants could take on board if they had the opportunity to speak direct with the objectors. So I'll be supporting the alternate recommendation, but I just also forewarn I think this would have a pretty strong case at VCAT. But we'll see where that goes.
Councillor Howard. Any other like to speak? Okay. I might just say a few words as well. I do note that this has been already taken to VCAT, so we do know already that it will go to VCAT. So, look, I'm concerned about the density in terms of the lot sizes, and from the lot sizes that sit around this development, the average lot size is about 630. And if we take into consideration, even with those high lot sizes at the back of the development. The average lot size is about 430 in this development. So I am concerned that it is probably out of touch with what sits around this development. The loss of trees is always a really hard one to swallow, because I think those trees do have a lot of, probably a few native wildlife in there, let alone what comes around the smaller parts of the trees and what a development might do to that site. The large amount of submissions and emails that we have received, I know that we've all read every single one of them. It's not just on the fact that there is a large amount, but the fact is what they're saying is that around the neighbourhood character they are concerned. So that then concerns me. And like Councillor Harwood had said, I am concerned about what the development might look like. Not knowing what is going there is probably the hardest bit to really say to the community, right, we can subdivide it into blocks, but without knowing what is going to be there and what is going to be on, for example, these neighbours on the right-hand side, what is going to be sitting on their boundary, is a difficult one, and I think that's hard for me to approve an application when we're not really sure what that means. So on saying that, I will be supporting the alternate recommendation, hoping that there is an opportunity at some point for this developer to engage with the submitters and also the local community, and that has been difficult due to COVID, but there are ways that we've been able to work around that even as a council. So there's been online presences and all those sorts of things. So there is a way. I just think that probably, in my view, should have happened. I'm going to put that to the vote now. So all of those in favour of the alternate recommendation, please raise your hand. Thank you. That is carried. And that concludes tonight's planning meeting. I'd like to thank everybody that has come in to the City Hall and those that are watching online, and we will see you next time. Thank you.